back and bigger than ever. It's the unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carrie, Josh, Eddie, and Bob.
All right, welcome back. It is another edition of the unofficial 40 podcast brought to you by Soonerscoop.com. With the entire gang is here. And, man, we've got sports coming out of our ears as the NCAA Tournament's getting ready to start. Also, spring football getting ready to start as we talked to Lincoln Riley today. And that's why we're podding a little bit later in the week. We wanted to make sure we had the pre-spring press conference in the books. And let's start there. Also, Sherri Coale resigning, which made a lot of people happy. Let's face it, though. The people that are cheering, like, finally, did those people go to any games, or will they go to any games in the future?
I don't know. Well, how old are they?
And are they lesbians?
You said it. I didn't.
Anyway, that's just my one pet peeve about the whole thing. Like, Sherri Coale made herself obsolete by taking a dead program and reviving it so well that she couldn't live up to her own standard. So, and it was time. Yeah, it was time. 25 years. 25 years. That's nobody should have any expectation of ever coaching it's not a major sport, Division I sport, I should say, for 25 years. I don't think it's possible to do it and do it at a high level for 25 years.
No, in all seriousness, I think that we saw it with Bob in football. It's like 19, 20 years at one place. Everybody needs some type of reset. Nobody is a robot outside of maybe Nick Saban. And shit, he hasn't even been in Tuscaloosa for 20 years, has he? Is it 21 now?
It's like
what,
12, isn't it?
No, he was like 07, 08, yeah. Now Kim Mulkey's been at Baylor since 2000.
The craziest one of all of them is the fact that Scott Drew's been down in Waco for 18 years.
Yeah,
wow.
We're leaving out Patty Gasso, who has been around, when Bob was around, and she's getting better with age. But then again, like she didn't have the problem that Sherri had, which is she would lose good assistants that were good recruiters, and she just never made up for it. I'll say this. This is my hot take of the day concerning women's basketball. Like, you hear all the olds that are in the broadcasting business, like Bo Overton. You really, this is not a woke culture thing. It's women's basketball, which I think probably has a lot more to do with recruiting than anything. I think there's probably a lot of people that could coach a college women's basketball team. What would be wrong with giving Courtney Paris a shot?
Her name's not Molly Miller.
Should we just give Eddie the floor on Molly Miller and let him go?
Eddie, like I did with Josh, why don't you explain to the people who Molly Miller is?
I would assume that a lot of people know who she is, but it was brought to my attention yesterday by one of our colleagues that she is one of the most winningest coaches in Division II basketball history. She has plenty of accolades.
But why do you really want it to be Molly Miller?
I want to cover the women's basketball team. I think it's an endeavor that I haven't tackled before, and I want to challenge myself. And I would encourage everybody to join me in the movement and maybe Google Molly Miller.
And there you go.
The problem is in Oklahoma, Molly Miller is a mysterious murder that has never been solved. So that's all I'm getting. Molly Miller basketball, yes.
Oh, well, just Google Molly Miller Grand Canyon University.
Molly Miller.
Is there any
basketball.
chance there's a connection? Did Molly Miller take a life? Is that what's happened here?
Yeah, maybe she changed her name. Maybe she assumed her identity and is coaching under. Now, that would be awesome.
Molly Miller would put butts in seats again. She's fantastic looking.
I think that she'd be a fantastic coach, too. She's obviously very qualified.
Not afraid to be a woman.
Grand Canyon University must have a pretty good athletic program out there. I mean, Bryce Drew's the men's head coach.
I'm going to say this, Eddie. It was one of those things. Eddie's making another dumbass point again, but you are like legitimately like she is a really good candidate, regardless of how she looks.
I mean, by Oklahoma basketball standards and what they've been over the last 3-4 seasons, she's overqualified.
Well, people would say like, "Oh, it's Division II." Well, remember where Sherri came from. She was just an extremely good high school coach. Like, you're literally making a step forward.
Exactly. I can't take credit for all of it. Again, it was brought to my attention. I won't out the person, but it was a terrific find. She used to be at Missouri State, too, I believe, and that's kind of where she got into the coaching ranks there, and I believe Drury maybe, Drury College. So
yeah,
I'm 100% in. I will carry the flag. I will carry the banner. I don't care what has to happen. Molly Miller to Norman.
All right, I've just gotten word. Josh, I want your response to this. The spring roster came out today, and I've been busy. We have a new sponsor on the message board, so I've been dealing with that all morning. I haven't gone back to see my post or see the thread since I posted on it, because OU did confirm that all those heights are correct. And they said, well, I'm going to check back on Jordan Mukes because that doesn't seem right. And all the players were measured. Measured. They were all measured.
The bit's done. We don't have to do.
They were all measured in socks, no shoes. So that's part of it too, which I think Rawlings Kabongo, is that right? Kabonge? Did I get it right? Nathan Rawlings Kabongo.
Kabonge is what I've gone with, but I don't know. I don't know that that's 100% right.
I don't think OU's put out the phonetics on that one yet. But he was 6'5" and a half or 6'4" and a half, was it? And that was I'm told that was correct. We should probably figure out which that is because that doesn't help the pod.
6'4", 247 is what they've got him listed at.
Not 6'4" and a half, just 6'4"?
It just says 6'4", yep.
Okay. But the thing that surprised everyone, like, no, that can't be right, is Jordan Mukes 6'1" and 1/2, and people at OU said, yeah, we're going to go double check that. I just got a text just before I started talking about this. I'm told Jordan Mukes at 6'1" and 1/2 is correct.
I don't know any way that's possible.
Really?
I mean, Bob, Eddie, you guys have seen him. Like, I would have said 6'3" for sure. Right. Maybe even pushing a 6'4". He is a big guy. Yeah, that one doesn't add up to me. And it's so funny because we always are talking about the inches being added that aren't there. But I mean, like in this example, he is the same height as, or he's an inch taller than Deshaun White. No way, no how. I don't. Either Deshaun is more like 5'10" or Jordan's taller than that. There's just no way those guys are the same size or even close to the same size.
And I was told standard operating procedure is they only go in halves, and they only round up if you're 3/4. So you're either 6 foot, you're 6.5, you're 6.5, or you're 6'1". You see what I'm saying?
I'm really glad
3 heights really.
That's not the way teachers saw things. I mean, 0.5 goes up. I mean, that's the way of the world.
Yep.
I mean, if you're a football coach, you got to have. I mean, what's ridiculous is, that stuff matters to kids. Like it just does, and so it's weird that you have to have policies like that. But I guess that's the policy that they figured makes people complain the least. But okay, so. Those were the numbers that were out there that people were talking about most. The other thing was Spence Jones, whatever you want to call him, he's a quarterback now. And he was a quarterback when he was a freshman at Liberty. That's what he was there to do. So it's not that far-fetched, but that was confirmed through OU as well because people on the board were like, this is just wrong. He's a quarterback. That can't be right. It's right. And I guess, Bob, with so few quarterbacks, they need just we talked about this a lot. They need some arms just to take throws off of people.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to bring in walk-ons in the summer, but you got to get through spring first. And see, before all, the fight in the bathroom and the holder of the year, what Jones was known for, he was the scout quarterback that got him ready for Army. So, yeah, he's been in this position, before. This is what he came initially to OU to do. But, yeah, I mean, it's just you got to get through spring. And really, I was surprised to see Tanner Schaefer was still on the roster because I've been informed that he didn't plan on coming back, and then maybe he's just going to help out for spring because he's going to class anyway, and then maybe he'll leave as soon as the summer gets here and those walk-ons that they looking to get from the high school ranks start to come in.
Before we get to Lincoln's comments today, Josh, you had it early that you were hearing that Buki was going to end up at Washington. And it looks like it was just simply a matter of him, waiting to get his degree. And he wanted to go ahead and get his degree first before he transferred out. And then he announces he's headed to Washington.
Yeah, I started hearing last week, and I actually talked to our guy, Lars Hansen, at our Washington site. And he kind of said, that's the word, is that he's going to transfer in. What's really interesting to me in talking to Lars a little bit was out of high school, Washington wouldn't recruit him because Jimmy Lake basically said he's too small. And now, I guess a couple years later, they've kind of seen him work in that nickelback role, and they have something kind of similar. And so they've said, okay, we think he can work here and do this for us. But, I mean, this is not a guy that Washington wanted out of high school. And, I know all the OU fans have kind of been down on Buki, but they saw enough of him at Oklahoma to feel like he can come and play for – guys, I mean, what we all know is one of the better defenses year in and year out in the country.
And what we also know is that OU wouldn't take Buki out of high school now. So
that's a fact.
It's a weird whole situation. Okay, so Lincoln Riley has his pre-spring press conference today. Eddie, you've been kind of quiet. Let's start with you. What was your number one takeaway today from Lincoln Riley?
Oh, I mean, probably just the fact that, I think that spring football has become a situation, and particularly when you have a mature team like Oklahoma does. I mean, I guess in a way that's kind of what Riley said in the opening, just as far as I guess would be the first thing I would say is they're as close back to normal as possible. I mean, even not having to test 3 times a week, I'm sure is something that is a good thing for the players, not having to worry about that kind of shit. And then, I guess obviously just kind of going through the competition of spring and finding guys. I think to a certain extent it's probably a little bit of coaches speak, but at the same time, like I thought the question that you asked as far as the wide receiver room goes was kind of interesting. They need more from that position. It was obviously up and down last year. You had ups with guys like Marvin Mims and his emerging role in the program, but then again you had guys like I guess in a way you can lump all 3 of the 5-star guys, Jaden Hazelwood, Trajan Bridges, and Theo Weiss into the same category, just as far as guys that really need to take that next step. And, to say that I don't think it is going to happen is probably a little bit of a lie. But, I think it's an important spring for a lot of those guys to, take the next step and move into roles that they can really be contributors and guys that they can count on offensively. So, I guess the Pat Field stuff is a little bit interesting too, just for the fact that he's not going to be able to participate. And, I think that even with him out there was a chance that he might end up losing a starting spot. And now with not being able to, go through a whole lot of things, I would imagine that you probably see a guy like a Pat Fields lose his starting spot. And whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know if Eddie left much on the bone for you there, Bob. By the way,
right?
Eddie, it's always smart it bodes well for your future when you say that you liked my question. So good on you.
I even used it in the social teaser. I'm just trying to get some people's asses around here.
I do, Bob. I think that's interesting, though, when Lincoln kind of becomes a hard ass. And it was like he did that with the wide receiver position. You can only do that with an
old group, though, right? Like, I don't think he would do that if this was a group of freshmen. But
no.
These are guys that can take a little bit of heat, take a little bit of getting called out into the media.
And, I don't think you can really include Trajan Bridges in that just because he didn't play last year until the very end. But it's definitely, he's trying to put forth a challenge. I'll say this. I think it's not so much about veterans or older guys. It's talent. He knows he has a shitload of talent in the receiving room, and he's going to do everything he can, Bob, I think, to squeeze every ounce of that talent out of this group.
Yeah, and if those older guys aren't going to do it, you're going to look to Mario Williams and Cody Jackson and tell them, okay, this is your chance to try to make your mark, because what we said before is for all the potential that's in the room, it's not a deep one. I mean, they only have 6 returning scholarship receivers that are back. I mean, they usually go through 6, 7, 8 receivers per game, getting quality number of reps. So when you look at, if there's anyone who's slacking off, those young guys are going to have their chances. But yeah, what you want is, Theo Weiss stop dropping those touchdown passes, Jaden Hazelwood to be fully healthy. I mean, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances for all 3 of those 5-star guys. But
you know what else was really interesting is he targeted his own coaches a lot, and I wonder if that wasn't a reflection of his disappointment in the development of Charleston Rambo a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of knew with Rambo that 2020 was going to be a sink or swim moment, and it just didn't work out. It's that they tried to make him the next version of CeeDee Lamb, and really they probably just needed to keep him as the 2019 version of Rambo with the same type of routes and all that he was doing in 2020.
Yeah, instead of trying to make him CeeDee Lamb. Yeah,
right. It just didn't pan out. They could for some reason that switch never went on to where he became the number 1 guy, and you knew you could count on him, and that was reflected throughout the entire year, where you felt like Spencer Rattler's best option, either going deep to Mims or going short intermediate with Stogner. It really felt like those were 2 guys that he developed the most trust with throughout the course of the season.
Eddie, what did you think about it? I mean, he wasn't asked a lot about just the minor position battles, but he was asked basically about the big issues, offensive line, defensive line. He was asked about the defensive backs a little bit. You have any particular takeaways that what stood out to you about maybe the offensive or defensive line? I mean, the defensive line was just kind of talking about how versatile we all know how they are, but I don't know. I thought maybe the offense, what he had to say, was the most interesting part.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be particularly interesting to see what ends up happening at center. I would imagine that they're going to give a number of guys the opportunity. I don't think that it's a situation that you're going to look up and Ian McIver is going to win the job. I think that they have plenty of talent to play the position. It just is going to be a matter of who steps up. And then, his name didn't get brought up, but I'm somewhat interested. Hopefully we'll be able to talk to Bill at some point during the spring, just as far as how good he thinks a guy like Awanye Morris can be. I certainly think that he's a guy that's expected to kind of almost not just necessarily walk into a starting position, but I would be shocked if he wasn't the starter against Tulane.
Well, I remember Gabe Eichert had told me this earlier, and I know he said it on his podcast, but he really believed that Chris Murray was going to be the next starting center at Oklahoma.
Yeah, which I think is, I don't know. I mean, I guess that would be good news, and then that means that, I mean, at the end of the day, is Tyrese Robinson going to end up being the odd man out? Because I would, and I,
somebody could legit get replaced on this line.
Where does Andrew Rame figure into all the whole mix?
Yeah,
I would imagine that he would have to be, busting somebody's ass to make a starting position this year. So, everything on the offensive line is kind of interesting. And what has become of a guy like a Stacey Wilkins? He's kind of, everybody, and Bob, you brought it up this morning, but everybody talks about Kennedy Brooks and Jalen Redmond returning to the mix, but I mean, Stacey Wilkins is still a guy that I think a lot of people around there feel like could be really good one day when the light comes on, but he's entering a spring, the light has to come on at some point or you got to start moving on.
The other thing that really is a topic, I know Bob's going to write a separate story on this, COVID and COVID protocols. And it was interesting. Lincoln said that, kind of the start, the press conference today that, he thought that this spring would be closer to a return to normal. And at the same time, I think, getting players to participate in kind of as a group, as a whole, in getting the vaccine. Look, I understand they can't make anyone do it. We've been kind of hinting at this for a while. They cannot force someone to get the vaccine, but it almost is being sold as, I don't know, it reminds me of like war bonds type things. It's like, do your duty to your team and get the vaccine. I mean, like, boy, that could be a rhyme. We could make a slogan out of that.
There you go.
But it's like,
put it on a shirt.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's one of those things. Like, coaches are like, look, if everybody has the vaccine, we can be so much more productive, so much room for activities.
It's one of those things, and I thought he was, I guess in a way I was surprised by the transparency that he talked about having those conversations with the players. And I would imagine that, it's not be stupid about it, but I would imagine that there is a lot of guys that have, their questions about what they're going to be putting in their body. And I find that whole conversation fascinating, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. And he did relay that, I guess the majority of the coaching staff has already got it. So, I mean, today was kind of the first time, and it was almost reassuring to feel like everything is finally, it's cliche to say it, and we'll say it 100 more times.
Josh breathing.
But everything is getting back to somewhat of a normal.
I wasn't going to wait for you to read my third DM, so I just yelled at you, Josh. Sorry. We're all doing our usual screw-ups today. Me and my major.
What I found interesting.
Let me throw this to Josh real quick, Bob. Along those lines, I mean, high school kids, you don't get the vaccine until you're 16. Why is everything rhyming today? So it's like high school's like, how do you have a feel at all for how this is going to play out? Because I mean, obviously, if people are vaccinated in high school, they're going to be willing to lift restrictions way more than just about any other division of sport, I would think.
I think a big part of why high schools can move a little faster is because we all know it. These are kids living at home with their parents and family members and all these things. So they have kind of a built-in structure of, you need to be either getting the vaccine or we're going to have you around the right people. The schools, unlike at college when they're away from their family, it's really up to the kids and the coaches to make sure they're kind of following proper protocols. They have adults at home to kind of keep an eye on them, make sure they can do that. So like I said, the schools don't carry the same level of responsibility, and I think it makes it easier for them. Also, they're all living within the same general area, the same general community. It's not like college where kids are coming in from California or Washington or anywhere else. You get a lot more, singular idea, I guess would be the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, basically what we got from Lincoln today was, and Bob, I think you were going to go into this a little bit, but, if everyone is vaccinated, then maybe, and he mentioned this, like maybe they could get to a point where people don't even have to wear masks anymore.
Right, just that the rules and the protocols could be separate if you've had the vaccine compared to if you haven't, and that'd be really strange to say. But I don't think he was threatening people with playing time, but in a way it could almost work out in that position if you don't get it and then you end up getting COVID or contact tracing because you didn't get it. I mean, that's really going to hurt yourself and it's going to hurt the team. But
and didn't he kind of almost sell? Is it almost made it out like he was selling it like, look, if you don't have the vaccine, you're probably going to live by a different set of rules than everybody else.
Yep, exactly. And that sounds really weird to say, and I don't know if that would create any division among the teammates or just how that culture would work out. But he said maybe down the road, he doesn't know if it's possible, but he thinks it's feasible that you could end up in that type of situation where people have different rules based on the way that they've lived their lives.
And I'd asked him, I got a text message afterwards for throwing two questions out at the same time from maybe a moderator. But I'd asked him about the NBA stuff too, because I think that's fascinating, like what Adam Silver is doing in the NBA, basically saying if everyone, did he put it at 85% or something like that? But if everyone got vaccinated, if 100% of your team was vaccinated, then at the practice facility, they're saying, and the players union agreed on this, like, you don't have to wear masks when you're in your facility if everybody's been vaccinated. So if they get everyone vaccinated and then we don't see, people missing games or teams missing games and contact tracing stuff goes away and you're getting back to normalcy with basketball, it'll be the first sport that really tells us, can this get us back to normal? And I think everybody's going to be watching to see how that model works because it would apply to them moving forward. I think we just lost
I missed
Bob.
some of it. I thought it was for Bob, so I was typing out a question.
Yeah, I think somehow we lost Bob. We're having a banner day with connections on the podcast.
It's been stellar.
Okay, one of the other things, Bob, I know you were planning on asking about it. You did ask about it, but you had three main guys. We talked about Stacey Wilkins that sat out. We haven't talked about Jalen Redmond, and not so much about Kennedy Brooks, but both those guys sat out last year, and now back on the roster, part of the team, going to be a part of the season. Even Jalen Redmond was back for bowl practices, what little they had, but. Kind of what was your take on how Lincoln kind of looks at those guys?
Yeah, I was just wondering, they willingly left the team, whether or not you agreed with their decision or not, that's what they did. And it's like, how tough was it to get back into the good graces? And it doesn't sound like it was a really difficult process. I mean, it's an unknown territory for everyone in terms of how this was handled. And it just sounds like when it got toward signing day, they needed to know for roster management and for scholarships and whether or not they had to recruit some other guys. But it doesn't sound like there was this big rift or it was really hard for them to be welcomed back. And the way I love how he phrased it, it's kind of like it never happened now. They're back. Everything's the way it used to be. We're back on schedule and, they're happy to have all three of those guys back. I wouldn't say they need to be hazed or something like that to be reinitiated into the program, but I was just sort of wondering if it was a little awkward at first for those guys to return with their teammates who went through this whole process throughout the 2020 season.
Yeah, and I mean, Jalen is a little different because he was not practicing, when it happened. He was coming back from that shoulder surgery, had not rehabbed it properly, was really frustrated as much as anything. Didn't even know if he would come back. And then he ended up, meeting with Lincoln throughout that year and then decided he was going to come back and then, rehabbed it the right way. And actually looked in pretty good shape and even back in the bowl practice when we saw pics of him. But Kennedy Brooks was a guy that could have played, didn't seem to be, a health issue or anything like that, but just decided not to play. So, I mean, I think everyone kind of wonders where his head is going into this season as well.
And whether he'll address it. He'll be one of the first players we want to talk to when we get a chance to talk with offensive players next week. Is it something that he'll really talk about, or is he just going to say, that was the past and I'm only focused on the future, or some sort of, where he declines to really comment on it?
And what did you guys kind of take from, you knew he was going to kind of get the question. I think Bob and I had talked about whether we should, ask this with him about where things stand with recruiting in the dead period. What did you guys think about his comments there?
I thought he took the PC answer as far as what he could say and what he should say.
Kind of like,
I think we know what he should have said.
Eventually it's coming, so I'm going to stop being a dick about it. Yeah,
basically. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And I feel like talked about it for 2 months now. It's been ridiculous as far as why we're still in a dead period. It doesn't make any sense to me. Especially when kids are traveling all over the country.
What was disappointing was yesterday the committee not really coming to a firm decision. You're seeing on social media like crazy. Kids are posting official visits first week of June. It sounds like the second weekend of June is shaping up to be a big visit weekend for the Sooners. Yet the committee that's overlooking this yesterday did not come out with a firm calendar So you almost want these guys are jumping the gun, and you like all these plans for June being a big visit month. Is it going to happen? Are they finally going to allow them to go forward with this? Because based on yesterday and not coming to a real conclusion, it still might be up in the air, which again just boggles the mind at this point.
I just think we're so much at the forefront of things changing and changing quickly with more and more people getting vaccinated. Like, if things go well, we don't have any more spikes and people are getting vaccinated and not as many people are getting sick. Like, they should just be able to kind of unilaterally lift restrictions. Like, that's kind of how I thought it should always work. It's like, yeah, you take precautions and you're extra cautious, but then when things change for the better, just be able to just one day turn on a dime and say, okay, we're done with that. Let's do this now. There's no reason the NCAA can't do that.
Yeah. Think about the people you're talking about, though. Doing the right thing and doing the smart thing aren't always the right thing that they do or subscribe to.
They're already ignoring OSU to get them in the tournament.
Yeah, they got 24 hours still to do something stupid.
They're going to get them in the bubble. And all right, yesterday was a big day for me. I got out and about, did a big radio deal at a big bar in Oklahoma City, tons of people, and I wanted to look my best. And so you know what I did? I grabbed my green Dead Soxies because it was St. Patty's Day. Didn't want anybody to pinch me. Put on my nice watch and went out and put on some nice shoes and went out on the town, and it was fantastic. It was like an old friend coming back to visit. And I tell you what, there is nothing better. The boardroom is what I wore yesterday, Eddie. And those things do not move once you pull them up. They are fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, and first off, welcome back to the world. And
I've been going to the grocery store and stuff.
Usually, you like people pinching you, so I'm just surprised that you didn't go with the no-show socks. And that's what I would have done. And I've been going out to the golf course lately, getting some putts in. They work out perfectly with the golf shoes if you're hitting balls or actually playing. So I go with the no-shows. I know that you go with the patented no-slip silicone beads to keep them up. So either or.
Even if you got like giant Josh calves, those things hold. Oh. I'm telling you.
I can't imagine how sturdy they would be on those mountains. Covering
that man calf tat. Anyway, if you want to cover your calf tat, go to Dead Soxy, DEADSOXY. We haven't even told you about the deal because if you're a Sooner Scoop listener or unofficial 40 listener, Sooner Scoop subscriber, reader, whatever, you can get 30% off with the promo code BOOMER at checkout. Just go through, pick what you want, the Crimson and Cream colorways. If you want to support the Sooners, if you want something for game day, put them in your cart. Put some no-shows in the cart. Put some boardrooms in the cart. And then when you check out, just put BOOMER as the promo code, and you'll get 30% off. That's deadsoxy.com, DEADSOXY. And remember, as always, stay soxy. All right, well, let's talk about it. De'Vion Harman, huge news yesterday.
Devastating.
Got the COVID. And, Bob, you were on the Zoom call. I was in the middle of doing some radio stuff yesterday afternoon. And when I heard the news from you, I mean, people have misused the word bombshell today. But that, I would say, was a bombshell. I mean, could you actually see people's jaws hitting the floor as Lon was announcing that?
Yes, and you can almost see Lon like just taking a big pause, like, oh boy, yeah, this is where we're at, And there's so many people now. You're gonna look to Kansas because it's Jalen Wilson. You're gonna look to Kansas as the reason as to why this happened, even though Lon has denied that or hasn't said there's any medical proof or scientific proof of how this happened. But Jalen Wilson and De'Vion Harman, high school teammates, best of friends. Jalen Wilson gets COVID, and that's why KU has to bow out of the Big 12 tournament. And now just days later, Harman gets it too. No one else on OU seems to be in any sort of trouble or contact tracing, positive test, just Harman. So for right or wrong, Jalen Wilson is going to be blamed for this.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's almost too big of a coincidence, isn't it? That both of them are now in protocol after just happening to be in the same spot in Kansas City. I mean, I don't know. It's hard not to put two and two together, but it's kind of like you said, Bob, like listening back to the Zoom call from Wednesday when Lon made the announcement. It's almost the ultimate ironic moment in the history of OU Zoom sessions that Aber asks the first question right out of the gate. How important has De'Vion Harman been to your guys' season on the back half of the year? And he's like, well, it's weird that you asked that. I got some news to tell you. I feel terrible for De'Vion Harman because, I mean, we're literally 4 days removed from talking to him on the Zoom call Sunday afternoon after the selection show. And he's basically talking about how he's getting ready to live his dream this week of being able to play in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, he's been thinking about since he was 3 years old. His family has always made the trip from Denton for every game. They were going to go to Indy for the games this weekend. And, I mean, you think about what he's meant to the team. And I think what Ryan might have been trying to allude to is that could he have been someone that could take over for Reeves a little bit so Reeves doesn't feel like he has to be a one-man show during those last 5 minutes? Is Harmon someone who's ready to step up and try to be that guy? Because, in Kansas City, especially against Kansas, that wasn't Harmon's greatest moment. And that's going to irritate him to no end, that's how he ended his season, was with that type of game. But that's where he's at now. Now you need Alondas Williams and Jalen Hill and Victor Iwuakor just to try to duplicate that energy, the production. That bench just got shorter by the second. I still think they go with a 4-guard lineup: Harkless, Reeves, Williams, and Mo Gibson, and then with Manick starting, and then you see what he brings to the table, and then Kirk West will come in, and Jalen Hill will have his time. But yeah, that's a huge blow, especially with the way that Harmon had been starting games. Yeah, I still think he faded a bit during the second half of games, but the first half he was that energy, that spark plug that really helped OU get off to nice starts time and time again.
I'll ask it as the most simple way possible. Can they even turn this thing around, or is it just
It doesn't look very good because it's just the things that, Lon has been saying constantly that it's not too different from January, but everything that is different is for the negative. They're not making the clutch shots, or the defensive tenacity is not there for 40 minutes. And that's been just the real big problem, is they just have lapses of concentration going down the stretch of this part of the season, is where you would expect them to be as focused as ever before. But it's been this part where they've had the flat outings, the first half against Texas, the first half against Kansas. And I just don't know if less than a week later, and now you lose someone who is maybe more focused than anybody else, because that's just how De'Vion Harmon's been wired this entire time. Now you can turn that switch back on and play like the team that we saw a couple months ago.
Bob, I think the thing that the casual fan who's been watching Oklahoma lately says with this news is, oh, God, that just means that Austin Reeves now has one more reason to keep the ball all the time.
And you're not wrong. I know Eddie made the joke, too, that he's never going to pass. You see him take every single shot, but there's going to be that part of Reeves that absolutely believes, okay, it's going to be up to me even more to try to do this. And that's why it's going to be imperative that Harkless, Gibson, and Manick make some early shots so that Reeves has faith and trust in the other teammates to try to make things happen going into the second half.
It's the ultimate glass half full OU fan spin zone, just to say, well, I mean, Reeves was going to have to get hot for this team to probably advance anyways. So you're just eliminating one guy in De'Vion Harman. Might as well just jack it up the entire game. I hope he doesn't pass the entire game. I think it'd be awesome.
You have to. I mean, I know that we put dirt on his grave, but don't you have to really let Brady Manick have a big role? I mean, isn't that really your only chance is for Brady Manick to play like he did at the end of the second half of the Kansas game?
You would have to have those guys play at a level that, if it's not going to be a Manick, you have to get something out of a Mo Gibson,
right,
or you're not going to win. I mean, it kind of is what it is. And, They win Saturday. It's good and fine. I think everybody knows what would be awaiting them on Monday, and that's their fault. That is 100% that team's fault for the position that they put themselves in.
And the problem with Manic is he'll have to go against Jeremiah Tillman of Missouri, who is a traditional back to the basket type of scorer. And we saw what Jericho Sims and David McCormick. We've seen what guys like that have done to Manic defensively throughout this season. And I think Tillman would just is going to have his way with Manic. So if Manic's not hitting offensively, you're going to have to get him out, because I just can't see a way that Tillman doesn't have at least like 15 points and 10 boards going up against Manic or even Queth, because Queth isn't a great on-ball defender. He's just a great rim protector who knows how to block shots. So unless they get Tillman in foul trouble, I think it could be a very long night in terms of the post.
I'm going to just call the shot now. I see OU making it to the Sweet 16.
Gonzaga got COVID?
Yes, that's exactly. You read my mind. Gonzaga gets COVID, and OU barely wins in overtime against Missouri. Straight to the Sweet 16.
Can you imagine how many people that's going to fuck over if OU was able to find a way and beat Missouri and then beat Gonzaga? Like, I would imagine there's quite a few bets being placed on Gonzaga on the table.
There's not one person that's entered in the $1 million bracket challenge that whoever's doing that, or the whatever, that's got Oklahoma going to the Sweet 16. I bet there's not one. But there's some idiot out there
I
that
think
did
you underestimate the Sooner Nation.
Yeah.
There's at least one I know of.
We need to find, if you're an OU fan and you
think
have
James
them
Hill put his in for OU.
He's mourning. All right. If you're an OU fan and you entered a bracket challenge and put OU into the Sweet 16, I'll give you a free month of Sooner Scoop if you email me, because you're insane.
I mean, I would imagine there's going to be a lot of people that just make a fake bracket and send it.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't go through all that trouble, you deserve a free month.
You're the underrated psycho if you're only filling out one bracket this year. I fill out like 15, and then I just pimp the one that's doing the best.
And for me, the Illini are winning them all. It's a great year. One champion.
See, you're a homer.
I am.
You're a homer, and you hate Mike Boynton. You just want Brad Underwood to stick it to OSU.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't think you had anything against OSU until this pod today. I was today's years old when I found out that Bob hates Oklahoma State.
Guys, can we claim a little fair weather? Because, I mean, I know Bob's from Illinois. Like, I get it. But I've never heard of this Illinois fandom until all of a sudden Illinois is a hot basketball team.
I haven't either.
Well, you should go through Twitter throughout the years. I always talk about the 2005 game. It's like an anniversary for me. Arizona, Illinois, the greatest comeback ever. This is my team even before the Sooners.
By the way, the system that we have set up here on the podcast, Josh doesn't know this. We've caught other people on the radio doing this. We just found out that today is the first podcast where as soon as Josh hears basketball talk, he gets up and leaves. And you knocked something over when you got up. I'm not sure what that was.
I didn't. The dog did, but yes, that definitely happened. I needed to hit the head, and I was like, they don't need any input from me on this topic, so I'm going to take my moment and do this now. And I had gotten away cleanly until my cord on my headphones is extremely long, and he ran underneath my desk. He grabbed it and it yanked it down off the top of the desk, and that was the loud clattering. And I look at him, and I'm still of the mind to make no noise. I'm like, what are you doing? Mouthing it. And so, it's a super not cool look, but sorry to everybody that heard the clatter.
That would have been better if you would have been yelling at your dog.
Well, yeah.
We would have been what the f*** is happening at Josh's house right now?
But then, ASPCA is going to call me with Sarah McLachlan playing in the background. It's going to be a whole thing, and I'm not interested.
That wouldn't be a bad ploy to get Sarah McLachlan to come to your house. Maybe that's what Michael Vick was doing the entire time. He just wanted to meet Sarah McLachlan. Sorry, man. It was just misunderstood. Our bad.
I did love that Dobra Wawa Super Bowl commercial.
I don't think I saw it.
I know I
tell
didn't.
me
I
any
can't think
commercial
of
in
it.
any Super Bowl, and I'd say I don't know.
It's the
I don't
one
really
where they
think-
took a Doberman and mixed it with a Chihuahua, and they were very aggressive. And so it was a Chihuahua body and a Doberman Pinscher's head. Just this huge head on a little body. It was hilarious. Anyway. Okay, so hoops coming up. What is our game? Saturday at
6:25
6
TNT.
on TNT. Okay.
I love that. I love the times for both OU and OSU. Friday 5:30, perfect patio weather.
Prime drinking
6:30
weather,
Saturday
or
night. That's
times.
beautiful. I'm so
down for
excited
it.
about the NCAA tournament. I can't contain it.
Can we say, other than Bob, who's a hater, that can we all say that we're all kind of looking forward to see what Cade Cunningham does in the tournament?
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
This feels like it could be like a Mello type situation where he just takes over the tournament for 4 rounds.
I can make both arguments. He could be Carmelo, or I can make the argument that Liberty ends up beating him because they turn the ball over so much. And
this is a team that still lost to TCU twice.
Well, guys, I mean, and you guys know I don't follow. This is more basketball than I've talked in the pod in years. But it feels like as Oklahoma's star descended, Oklahoma State, like it just at the same time, like almost exactly parallel. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sure it's a really obvious
take. 4
take.
games were against OU.
Yeah, that helped. I mean, look, they're playing really good basketball going into it. I mean, they really are, and it's because
the ball over too much.
And I think it's a big part of that is because Likely was out and Cade Cunningham, like he's been a hesitant star for them. I mean, there's a reason they lost 2 to TCU. You should never lose to TCU when you have Cade Cunningham on your team, but he's always been a guy that defers and wants his teammates to be involved, and they got better when they put it on his shoulders and said, hey, go win. And remember, Cade Cunningham, I think didn't he miss a layup at the end of one of those TCU games that would have either tied it or won it, I think. So
he got called for a charge, right?
There was something that happened with him at the end where he could have made the play, but he didn't.
Yeah.
In which game?
One of the
TCU.
TCU games.
Oh, yeah, he got called for the charge underneath the basket in the second game down in Stillwater because they blew the big lead up in Stillwater. I mean, down in Fort Worth.
Yeah. But, I mean, the more they put it on his shoulders, the better they got. I mean, they played well as a team. It hadn't just been him.
Avery Anderson's been incredible.
Yeah, Anderson's been great.
When Cade was out in Morgantown, that's when Anderson came. And
that win in Morgantown without him, that proves how much better they've gotten as a team. So, anyway, it's not. This is not the Pistols Firing OSU basketball pregame podcast. Let's head on
You're welcome for the content, Carson. You're welcome.
I like Carson, even though we get little spats here and there.
Love Carson.
We're good. I like Carson. So let's hit the recruiting trail a little bit, Josh. I guess we'll just start off. Just kind of what's new. What's the latest?
Well, as Bob talked about, I mean, we're starting to hear some of these stories of guys starting to set up their official visits, and
all centered around a date, right?
Yeah. I mean, and this is that was it June 12th? Is that what it was, Bob?
Yep.
I'm trying to remember the exact. Yeah.
Weekend.
So I know I was like, I feel like that's right, but Bob will know for sure. I'm always bad about that. But, I mean, you've had guys like Dane Shore, the big offensive lineman offer. The one that was a little surprising, I think, to everybody was Jalen Lewis, the defensive back out of Tennessee, that really there hasn't been a lot of talk about. But clearly, I mean, that's just something we've kind of missed. And it's one of these scenarios that happens more and more when, our rivals reporters aren't around these guys at these camps or these events. It's harder to have that contact, so the news can kind of slip through the cracks sometimes. But yeah, I mean, you're seeing guys that, like I said, that aren't maybe the most obvious choices as, oh yeah, that guy's going to visit, as starting to set up these visits. Another guy that's been kind of in the news is Gabe Dindy, probably I would say probably with the exception of Gentry Williams, probably Oklahoma's most key defensive target right now, the big guy to Florida, whose parents are both OU alums. Talked with Chad Simmons this week, and really, is clearly about to cut his list to 4. I am very, very confident Oklahoma will make that 4, but has said that he wants to wait until the All-American games to make his decision. So, I mean, that's a long time for OU to have to wait and kind of not know, but we know how these things usually go. The school usually knows long before then. But we'll see what happens. But like I said, I think he is a guy that Oklahoma really, really needs to land to kind of make this defensive line class take that next step where they're landing a lot of good guys, a lot of good talent with potential. But now you've got to start landing those premier guys that everybody wants, and Dindy's certainly one of those guys.
Now, in terms of it is kind of interesting because some of the schools that didn't play in the fall are now playing in the spring, especially up north. And I know there's some interest from us in some of that, right, Josh?
I'm sorry, I missed something there. It cut out a little bit.
De'Vion Harman, Gilliam.
Yeah, I mean, just parts of the country playing spring football now that's going to kind of pique our interest a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, this is guys. There was times when I remember, in our group conversation, we're like, man, this is going to be hard. How are we going to do this? I feel like I've been able to cover and see, and especially by the end of the spring season, more players in a calendar year and get to see them not in a camp setting where you're watching maybe 4, maybe 5 reps and, going against, questionable competition or maybe, just in a setting where you can't really have a lot that's under control. But getting to see them in games, getting to see action. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to go see De'Vion Harman and Kelvin Gilliam along with the defensive back offer, Braylon Johnson. Then you're going to get to see we're planning to make a trip to Southern California, see some guys out there, obviously led by Raleek Brown, the big-time running back commitment. So the fact that the season has been staggered has allowed us to kind of pick up some games and pick up some opportunities that we normally wouldn't get. So, I mean, obviously get to go see video, get pictures. And, yeah, De'Vion Harman and Kelvin Gilliam have already signed, and that's fine. But just, to have a better feel for those guys, especially when they're closer to enrolling than any players I've ever watched in a game. I mean, you see the pictures of Kelvin Gilliam walking around the sidelines in Highland Springs. That looks like a guy that's ready to play ball next year. So I'm super interested in this. Obviously never been to Virginia to see a high school game. Really anxious to kind of see how that comes out. And then, like I said, to turn around, go to Southern California and see Modern Day that is just, I'm expecting like 14 Division I guys on their roster, or I guess in their starting lineup. Forget roster. So it should be a lot of fun here over the next few weeks. And then, obviously, with the camps going on, there's going to be another Under Armour camp in Houston. We've got Rivals camps coming up in Dallas, Southern California as well. So it's about to get really busy in a time of year that always is busy, but it's kind of a different, and I think it's more interesting, honestly.
Outside of that, I know from kind of doing some stuff, a lot of Oklahoma spring stuff, a lot of the bigger schools, like they won't start spring football until track is over. But, does it look like at the high school level that spring football, from what you've been able to tell, is going to come back pretty much normal as usual?
It was pretty normal a year ago, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that's true. That's true.
Well, it was delayed. I mean, they had that whole delay where they did it in like June. But yeah, I mean, with that exception, I missed a couple of practices like Jinx. I didn't get to see because they had a situation there on the day I was supposed to go where they had somebody test positive. So you had to go through all of that. But in general, it was pretty normal. But this year should be like we're used to, kind of late May, everybody going through spring practices once the track season is over. And I'm anxious to see it because, guys, like we've talked about, this class of 2022 is really, really good in state. You've got the big-time frontline guys like Talon Shetron, who, we need to talk about him at Under Armour this past weekend that Eddie and I saw. But, him, Gentry Williams, Jacob Sexton, who was also really good at Under Armour. You go down the list, and there's a lot of frontline guys. But, man, the more tape you watch, I mean, guys, there's Power 5 guys that are going to end up in my 30s in the state rankings. So, I mean, there are There's just so much talent in the state. And then 2023, 2024 already has a guy with an offer who we saw again at Under Armour this weekend, David Stone at Del City. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot to see and, going to be really busy that week or so making our way and kind of rounds around the state.
Now, I maybe some people saw this. Like I said, I want to get to the Under Armour stuff in a minute, but I think people that are just kind of casual fans probably saw this. Florida coming into Oklahoma and offering a defensive end. And I think there's a family connection there as well, a little bit with the coaches, right, and the players' family.
Yeah, his father played at Mississippi State, so there is a correlation there with Mullen and that whole connection with his time at Mississippi State. Now, they don't exactly overlap, but there are members of the staff where there is connection there. But Chris McClellan, and it's funny because I talked to Chris probably 3 weeks ago, and he had told me he had been in conversation with Florida, and they were kind of like, man, why isn't Oklahoma all over you? Why, like a kind of jabbing OU a little bit because they weren't involved. And I thought, well, at the time, you haven't offered him either. So what's that all about? But now they've come through. I mean, and you're really starting to see his offers elevate. It was, good ones, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, good programs, but now it's like Michigan, USC, Florida. I mean, he's starting to move into those top 10 type programs. And at some point, you wonder if OU's just going to say, we can't, if this guy's got all this, how long can we pass on him? Because if you don't get Gabe Dindy or you don't get Amari Abor from Duncanville, and then Chris McClellan, who's in your backyard, has made multiple trips to Norman, doesn't get an offer and goes to Florida or goes to USC, boy, that's a tough pill to swallow. That's a real loss of talent that you could have had.
Is he any closer to getting an offer, do you think?
I would say strictly from what I'm from a pressure standpoint, yeah. Because like I said, it's one of those things where, I mean, we can go back to Sam Bradford. I think OU was willing to take their time with Sam Bradford until Michigan came in and USC came in. And then all of a sudden it started to change the storyline on him. Why are you not offering this kid whose, father played at Oklahoma? There's all these connections. I think that's where it's moving with Chris McClellan. But at the same time, as long as OU feels good about Dindy and Abor, I don't think it's a problem. But if you're not pretty confident there, I think you have to make a move. And I think, excuse me, I think if you can't, if you see OU start to make that move, I think it probably is an indication of, okay, maybe we're a little worried here. Maybe we don't want to wait as long as we need to. And I think Dindy is open-ended. As long as he wants to have a spot, he's got a spot. With Abor, it's not so much that they would pass on him. It's that maybe they're not as confident as they want to be.
All right, you mentioned Under Armour. You and Eddie went down to Arlington last weekend. Just kind of give us a first impressions breakdown of what really stood out to you.
Well, I mean, I mentioned him a second ago, but and Eddie can back me up with this. I thought Talon Chetron looked awesome. And you're talking about a guy, I mean, he said it in the interview with us. He was 2 days removed from playing his last basketball game. This is not a guy that's been training and all, off season. He's been playing basketball. And so for him to come around, and I thought, with guys like Evan Stewart, I'm going to blank on it. I mean, there were, I think, 4 top 30 receivers in the country at this camp. I mean, it was just a really good group of receivers. And for my money, Chetron was absolutely the best guy there. So, and, it's so crazy to think, and Bob and Eddie, you guys know it too, to see that kid as a freshman and see where he is now. Like, every time I see him, he's continuing to get bigger and stronger. Like, you can tell he's putting in the work. And, again, that's coming off basketball season. I mean, he hadn't been in the weight room. He's just getting bigger. It's just kind of his frame is filling out. And somebody asked me in the board chat this week, who does he remind you of? And now looking at him up close and the way he moves and kind of how his game is kind of set up, he reminds me a lot of Roy Williams, the old Texas receiver. That's who he looks like to me, and that same kind of big overwhelming size, but he's got more speed than you think he does. He like I said, he's coming along, and a year ago, if you would have told me I thought Talon Chetron had a real shot at 5 stars, I don't think I would have believed you, but that's becoming very possible for him.
Yeah, we just got to stop going to his games. That's we're the only thing holding him back right now.
One catch.
His dad
yards.
literally asked if it was Bob or Eddie that is cursing him, but he needs answers. The Chetron's family is losing patience with Sooner Scoop.
I threw you under the bus, Bob. I blamed it all on you. I said, "There's no."
All right.
No, he does look like that was one of the first things that kind of popped off to me, though. Even before the workout started, Josh, was just how big, how just physically mature he's starting to grow into his body. I think would probably be the best way to say it. So he's going to be dominant if they can if they have somebody that can get him the ball over at Santa Fe, which I think that they do, because I know that we like the freshman that they have over there. He could put up some big numbers as a senior.
Anybody that you saw that, that maybe had gotten an offer from OU that you saw them in person and you thought, okay, this kid's a lot better than I thought, or maybe justified an evaluation that OU had on a kid?
I would say go ahead.
That was the first time that I saw Luke Haas. I mean, he stacks up with just about anybody, and to remind yourself that he's only going to be a junior, it's kind of a whoa moment.
Yeah, I mean, watching him work against some of the, again, a really good group of DBs. I mean, this camp was very deep. I mean, almost every position, there were multiple OU offer level guys. And so watching him go against a guy like Javian Toviano, who is absolutely, the guy, when you asked that question, Kerry, he's the guy that came to my mind as absolutely maybe the guy that impressed me the most physically, the way he played. I mean, just a big defensive back from the Dallas Metroplex that OU offered, I want to say about 2 weeks ago. And he is, excuse me, I'm having trouble right now. He is all that Alex Grinch has talked about: length, size. He turns and runs well, but he can really do just about everything. And I'm a huge fan. Also, Jonte Cook, the 2023 receiver from DeSoto. Everybody's told me about him since he was a freshman. It was my first chance to really watch him, and I mean, he is I can't think of a better comparison that I'll come up with in the next few years of watching him than Mark Clayton. That's exactly who he reminds me of. Same kind of quick little twitchy burst, more speed than you think. He's bigger than you think he is, but just was super impressed with his work.
Is it just like you got like cotton mouth? Is the mouth dry? The throat dry?
Yeah, my throat is dry. And I hadn't noticed it until we got to this segment. I'm like, I am dying here. I keep trying not to cough pretty much through every answer I'm making. So I am half vaccinated, but maybe I got the Rona. I don't know.
No, I think that's just kind of gone. I've had a sore throat. Like, that's the only thing I ever get now is sore throat or dry throat. Like, I'm kind of having a dry throat the last couple of days.
Yeah.
It might just be the humidity going up and down with the weather changing.
Yeah. I woke up this morning and had some junk for sure, so I don't know what it is.
It's called little doorknob lickers.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, they are walking Petri dishes. It's not good. But no, I mean, there were several guys. Like I said, it was a really, really good camp. I wish we'd have had more time to watch some of the O-line, D-line stuff. But yeah, I'm kind of to stick with in-state. Like I said, I thought Jacob Sexton, he only had a couple of reps, but he was very good. David Stone, the young guy I mentioned from Del City, he is going to be special. I mean, just kind of like I was just saying about Chetron, I don't think I would have believed a year ago, and certainly not farther back, that he could push for 5 stars. But I absolutely could see that becoming a possibility for David Stone. And the last time the state produced a 5-star defensive lineman was Gerald McCoy.
Yeah, I mean, anything that caught your eye quarterback-wise at the camp?
No, not really. And I'll be fully honest. Part of it was I knew I didn't have to be that locked into it. I talked to a few people that, there were some really young guys, like 2024 guys that were pretty promising. There's a kid from the North Dallas area that was there the day before at kind of their, basically 16 and under type camp. And I talked to a few of the coaches that were, working both the kind of the young high school and the varsity type camp. And they said he's going to be unbelievable. So there's some of that going around. But, 2022, we know what's out there. We know who OU's going to look at should they choose to, but it just doesn't sound like that's currently the plan. 2023, it's full steam ahead with Malachi Nelson. I continue to hear that's going really well for Oklahoma. And then 2024, we've just got to see what direction OU wants to go. I've heard of a couple of in-state kids that are pretty promising, but we'll just have to see because that's going to be that even year where Oklahoma's going to maybe the even years are the Micah Bowens years. Maybe that's what we've come to know those as, where they go and find a transfer, kind of see how it works out, let that play out how it will, but maybe don't really push for the elite quarterbacks unless they just find a guy they're absolutely in love with.
Eddie doesn't know this, Josh, but I told Josh before this camp, Eddie's been in quarantine. And he's not isolated, but he hasn't been out in the camp setting for a while. And I said, Josh, be careful, watch Eddie, because I'm a little afraid he might be getting a little too thirsty on the hot mom watch. Did he behave himself and everything okay?
He was. There might have been a few moms he was checking to see if they had attended the camp or not. But, definitely stayed on
You're saying
task,
he's been scouting them online, so he knows.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Eddie knows. Eddie's no fool. I think anyone that listens to this podcast would just flat out know I was lying out of my ass if I said Eddie was not aware of such things.
All I can do is see the opportunities in front of me and make sure that they get a good divorce lawyer.
Take it one mom at a time.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
And just keep working on the hair.
Loosely affiliated with what Casey Anthony was trying to pull off, but I don't have any kids. Hey, Josh, real quick, I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
We have the video of them going head to head, but I thought Ish Harris was a really good looking athlete.
He is. What I found most interesting about that, Eddie, was him working at running back. Like, what does that say? Because almost everything I understand is him as some sort of defensive recruit, whether it's linebacker or safety or some sort of rover setup. There's something along those lines that's happening. I haven't heard any talk of him as a running back, so I don't know what to make of that, really. But, yeah, like you mentioned, he went head-to-head with Kip Lewis, the linebacker from Carthage, who I've got an interview I need to run. But Kip spoke very highly of Brian Odom, really kind of mentioned him as one of the relationships that's really one of his strongest so far in the coaching ranks. Wants to get up to OU for a visit. It's never been up there before. That's the weird part right now, is doing these interviews with these guys going into their senior year. And a place like OU, if you're a major recruit, you've probably visited twice by now, usually. But with all the restrictions and everything going on, they're like, yeah, I love OU, but I've never seen it. Like last year, it was still unusual because, you had Mario Williams, you had Rollins Kabonge, but those guys were from way far away. Most of the guys locally had already taken a few visits before the world got shut down. And this year, there's just masses of kids that are probably going to end up at Oklahoma's class that at this point in time have never seen OU.
All right. Anything else you guys wanted to get out there before we get out of here this week?
It's off the beaten record, but OU baseball with a big win on Tuesday night over in Fayetteville, number one team in the country. So maybe they're turning things around.
It was pretty rough there for a while, Eddie.
Where you can say that they have a pretty good offense. We'll see how they do. Big 12 conference play is going to begin not this weekend, but next weekend, and they have Houston for a 3-game series in Norman. So some big weeks ahead for the University of Oklahoma baseball team.
All right. I think that's going to do it for this week. I appreciate everybody joining us once again. Thanks to the entire crew for being here as well. So thank you for listening. We'll be back again next week with spring practices underway, and we'll probably know the fate of OU's basketball team, unfortunately.
Hey!
They have to play Gonzaga even if they win the opener. So.
No, you're in COVID.
Unless my COVID plan comes together, yes.
Yeah, just remember, you're giving out free subs for people that are picking OU to go to the Sweet 16.
I haven't had my legal disclaimer on that yet, so still got to think of this a little bit. So, okay, so thank you for joining us. Go get you some Dead Soxy socks. As I said earlier, I had them for my St. Patty's Day socks, and they were wonderful. So thanks to them, and thanks to you all for listening. We'll be back again next week right here for another edition of the Unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com.